And here we go. We have liftoff. Propulsion continues to be normal.
RCPA chamber pressure looks good.
Following up. Roger, with planet.
Water towers fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Flight downside SPD off. SPD off. Off. It's orange!
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage. Put that in the big bag,
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
This methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You dead? We don't need any more of these.
Good afternoon from Florida's Space Coast. You are taking a live look at Space Launch Complex 40 at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida, where in about an hour from now we will hopefully see the launch of the Putih 2 mission. I will be your host, Sawyer Rosenstein, and I see all the 5x5s in chat, which I appreciate, meaning that you can hear me. But it won't just me that you'll be hearing, of course. Joining me with the co-hosting duties here is Alex. How's it going, Alex?
I'm doing fantastic. We have another launch from the Cape, and of course, it's another Falcon 9, so I had to be here.
Gotta show that Falcon 9 love. And also here with us with more Falcon 9 coverage, out in the field is Max. How's it going, Max?
Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to a very blustery day on Cape Canaveral Space Force Station for Rejoice, a daytime Falcon 9 launch.
Yes, it's been nice seeing more of those lately. What isn't so nice is seeing that camera shake because the winds are indeed quite gusty, so we'll have to see if they stay within limits for liftoff. But before we talk about that, let's talk a little bit about the mission itself. So, we've seen it as Telkomsat HTS-113BT is the official name, but we've also referring to it as Putih 2. So what exactly is this?
Yeah, this is a communications satellite that is essentially owned by the state-owned company Telkomsat. They're basically the ones that tend to provide the communication services for Indonesia. So this one has been built by Thales Alenia. You can see sort of the logo on this side there of that company, and then so this is sort of a 4-ton communication satellite. It's supposed to go to the 113 degree east location out in geostationary orbit. Falcon 9 will not drop it off directly into geostationary orbit, though. It'll be on a geostationary transfer orbit that it'll be dropping it off, and then the satellite will do its own thing, and it'll go into its final position and all those things with its own propulsion. And so that's why the name of the satellite has that 113BT thing. I don't know what BT means or stands for, to be fair. Might have some significance or something, but the 113, it stands for that orbital position at 113 degrees east over Indonesia, basically. And so, yeah, this is supposed to be able to provide about 32 gigabytes per second of connectivity to all of the customers over Indonesia, and that's sort of the main goal of this is just basically a communication satellite. Now, you may remember, for those that have been following Falcon 9 for a long time, that Putih is like a familiar name, and that is because SpaceX already launched another satellite, which was it was the Telkomsat for satellite, which was also nicknamed Putih. But that was Putih 1, and this is the 2. So this is the second one that is called like that. I really don't remember. I'm trying to look through here. What is the meaning? Because it's like some kind of meaning in Indonesian. So I'm fast fastly going here, quickly going through the significance of the satellite name, but I cannot find it. I had it somewhere. Okay, well, I'll look it up and then I'll try to talk about it later. But yeah, it's one of these other satellites that they have built, and that they are developing for Telkomsat. And so in that case, that one was with Space Systems Loral. It was a different company. For Merah Putih one, it was also the first reuse of a Falcon 9 Block 5 booster. But I'm sure you all know by now, this is certainly not the first time they are reusing any Falcon 9 Block 5 booster. In this case, this is the B1067. It is flying for the 17th time. It's a lot of launches. So yeah, just to speed run through all of the launches, it was CRS-22, Crew 3, Turksat 5B, Crew 4, CRS-25, Starlink 434, Hotbird 13G, O3B Power 1, Starlink 5.2, Starlink 5.5, Starlink 5.9, Satria, Starlink 6.10, Starlink 6.22, Starlink 6.29, and Starlink 6.35. And as always, it'll be landing back on Earth, but instead of on land like we've had in the last few weeks, it'll be on a drone ship. Just read the instructions, which is about 650 kilometers downrange in the Atlantic Ocean, and the fairings are being recovered by Bob. So there you go.
Hi, Bob.
Hi, Bob.
Oh boy. So
Meanwhile, I'm gonna be looking through here.
while you're looking through that, we've been looking at the camera kind of shaking a little bit. Max, how are the winds out there?
It is pretty blustery out right now. I don't have the exact wind measurements on me right now, but last I heard we were around the limit of what Falcon 9 can handle in this configuration. It's currently blowing not quite directly south, but more so southeast, and upwards of around 20 or so miles an hour. So it's blowing pretty good. And some of the some of the water over here in the river, here in the Space Force Station is white capping. So. But other than that, it is a remarkably clear day. There is not a single cloud in the sky, and there's next to no haze in the atmosphere at all, which is wonderful to see, and a great change of pace compared to what the weather has been recently as well. But hopefully these winds stay within limits, and we can get Falcon 9 off at the opening of the window.
That's what we're hoping for here. They do have a 2-hour launch window that they can go within, but we are, as mentioned, currently hoping and targeting for the opening of the window, which is scheduled for just about 53 minutes from now. And I know there's people asking about the wind conditions and the constraints and things like that. According to NASA, for Crew Dragon flights, keeping in mind that's Crew Dragon, not necessarily the same for a mission with a fairing or from Slick 40, but those wind constraints are within 30 knots of sustained wind at the 162-foot level of the launch pad. Is it a little bit higher, do we know, Alex, for uncrew?
How strong again?
30 knots at the 162-foot level of the launch pad.
Boy, 30 knots. Yeah, that does sound a little bit high for liftoff winds.
Well, those are the...
Yeah.
Yeah, that's NASA when they launch Crew Dragon. That's their constraints.
Oh, the constraints.
Yes.
I thought you meant like what is the wind right now?
No, I meant in terms of what the constraints are of what Falcon can and can't launch in.
Yeah, 30 knots. That kind of sounds about right.
All right. Let's see here. We have a question from Ross saying, is the abort wind speed higher for drone ship recoveries compared to RTLS recoveries? Alex, is there a difference?
Well, for liftoff winds, or upper level winds, I guess it kind of just is all about the ascent portion of the flight rather than the landing. It is also true that you kind of have to account for the winds at the drone ship side. And those can differ from the launch side. When you have an RTLS, normally the wind conditions are pretty much the same as the launch wind conditions. So it kind of differs in terms of the conditions, obviously, because they are different locations. But the criteria, I don't really know if it's that much different, because when you calm down, actually a faster wind, I guess, could be a bit stabilizing for the booster when it comes down under a single engine and just the grip fins and things like that, rather than when it's going up and trying to go like away from that wind. I don't know, like I'm not really that bright right now trying to explain this, but I will think that perhaps during landing the constraints are a little bit higher because you're trying to target the landing location and the wind moving it out with a mostly empty booster. That will probably be easier to move, right, with high winds and things like that. So I'm guessing there's probably some differences on the way up and the way down, but in general the conditions are obviously different when you are on a drone ship because it's way out in the ocean. So yeah.
Right, and with just read the instructions downrange for this one, I think this is the perfect time to bring up the announcement that was kind of made about the Bahamas, saying, "Hey, come here and watch the landings." What are your thoughts on that, Alex?
Yeah, so that is an interesting one, because apparently what they're trying to do is be east of a certain island, which I think it's called Exuma, within the Bahamas archipelago, or like the group of islands of the Bahamas. And so it looks like, given the location, that what they're trying to do is sort of try to land the booster right in the middle of the archipelago, or of this group of islands. And if you look at a map, what is that location compared to the current one that they use? It looks like it is a little bit of a higher inclination orbit that they're trying to target. And I'm thinking this might be so that SpaceX doesn't have to go around the Bahamas for a launch to a 53-degree inclination orbit. Because the ones that we're seeing lately for like the past 40 Starlink launches from the Cape, right? The past 40 launches from the Cape of Starlink have been to a 43-degree inclination, which is not really that high inclination. It's sort of like midway through between 0 and 40 and 90. So it's almost at 45. So yeah, 43 is almost there to halfway through that midway point. And so that inclination allows them to just do like a slight small dogleg around the Bahamas to be able to go into 43 degrees. But if you want to go to 53 degrees, which is where they're going to be launching their direct-to-cell satellites, for example, then you wanna have to go a little bit more south, and you can't because the Bahamas is just right there. But if you can actually overfly and land in the Bahamas, then that's easier, right? You don't need to do a dog leg or anything like it and lose performance. And so that is precisely what I think they're going to be doing in the near term, where they're going to have the drone ship right there in the middle of those islands and then be able to go into 53-degree inclination.
I know there's a fight in the back channels of who's going to get to go down to the Bahamas to go watch the landing. I volunteer as tribute as well. Let's see here. Let's talk a little bit about the landing itself. You said it's going downrange for something like a Starlink, but for a mission like this, it's a little bit more simple than that. So, Max, what is the trajectory for today's launch?
So Falcon 9 today is heading straight on into a geostationary transfer orbit. So essentially, if you locate if you put yourself on the space coast of Florida, it is essentially launching straight east, as opposed to a Starlink, as we just talked about, launching southeast, or an ISS trajectory launching northeast at about 51.6 degrees. Geostationary transfer orbits, or just geostationary orbits in general, tend to launch directly straight east. So it would be a lot easier to see if it was at night, because, of course, it would be a nice wide arch, whether you were north or south of the pad, regardless. But for orbits heading out to GTO. They are always heading straight east.
Awesome. Due
And it
east
kind of
of the
looks,
way.
yeah, and in that map, kind of looks like it's curving a little bit. That's because that's sort of like the trajectory that you do when you go into orbit. That kind of curves a little bit south. It is not that it's sort of doing a dog leg there or anything like. It's just that that's sort of the overall mechanics of things. It's what is it, the Coriolis effect or something like that. But anyways, yeah, when you go into orbit, since it's like a circle, right? So when you project that onto a map, it kind of looks like it's curving south, but that's pretty much what an orbit looks like when you try to project that. But yeah, looking up from the Cape, it should be straight away to the east.
There we go. Here's a question from Jeff, and this is probably a perfect technical type question for you, Alex.
Oh boy.
At T-1 minute, we always mention that the tanks are pressed to flight pressure. Jeff's wondering, what are the tank's flight pressures?
Oh, I don't think they have talked about this. Like, what is the actual number of bars and things like that? I know that, for example, for Starship, Elon has talked about the pressures because there was a point where that was an issue, and he was concerned about the quality of the tanks and things like that. That was 4 years ago, by the way, just to make us everyone here old. Yeah, that was 4 years ago when they were having troubles with that. How things have changed, right? But yeah, it on Starship is about 6 bar. I don't think it really needs to be that high for Falcon though, because I believe the tank pressure kind of relates with how the engines work and also what else is going on inside of the tank. And so if you have like a engine like Raptor where you have like full flow stage combustion and things like that, you probably need a bit of a higher tank pressure. But in order, and also for the structural concerns as well, because it's like thinner stainless steel alloy. If you have an even thinner body, then you probably need a much higher pressure, like Centaur, for example. But we really don't know for Falcon 9 though. That's sort of like the issue here. That yeah, we don't get to know those numbers.
That's all right, no pressure. Oh wait.
I knew you were gonna do it.
Here we go.
I'm sorry, I had to.
Someone take the bingo card already. Sawyer makes a pun.
That should be the free space. But in terms of actually pressurizing it, why do they pressurize the flight tanks? For those who don't know.
Yeah, so that is a great question, because you could think of it. Well, if it's on the ground, right? Why do you even need to bring it to flight pressure? Like, why does it have a flight pressure at all, right? And the thing is, when you pressurize the tanks, it kind of gives it a more structural stability. It is not that they cannot stand by themselves without the pressure, right? But what it does is that when it's flying, it kind of gives it more rigidity and more strength, so to speak, right? And so the difference between on the ground and on flight is because during flight it's experiencing tons and tons of forces from everywhere else, right? Like as it goes up, it's getting hydrodynamic pressure on the top that sort of tries to compress the rocket. It is also getting bending loads from side to side from different winds being, hitting on the rocket differently on one side or the other. The torque of the engine is like, there's so many forces acting on the rocket compared to when it's on the ground, where it's just gravity, right? And so you kind of need it to bring up to a flight pressure, because it kind of gives it a more structural strength to be able to support that. A similar thing we see, for example, when they move things at Starbase, just to connect a little bit with a recent move that we have had at Starbase right now, where they pressurize the tanks on the booster or the ship to be able to basically the transport of going from the launch site to the production site, or the production site to the launch site. It is not a flight environment, right? But you kind of want to have it pressurized so that it can support the different loads that you see during a transport of that nature, and it is definitely not flight pressures, but it's higher pressure than you could see probably when it is sitting just on its own.
There you go. So now we know why they are pressurized for flight. Thank you, Alex. Here's a question for Max, and I'm going to regret asking this, but Mark wants to know, stubby today?
You know, I love how this has become a fairly regular question. So thank you very much, Chad. That means a bunch to me against all these stubby nozzle haters. I think given the performance needed between the upper stage and the booster today, I think this calls for the full size nozzle. Unfortunately, not much more to say than that. I'm heartbroken.
Oh no, heartbroken Max. I do want to thank some support here. Just a fair warning, we're working on getting it so that we can actually see your name on screen, but I still want to shout everybody out. We've got Josh Zero, thank you for the support, saying Falcon 9 strap with 2 Starship boosters. That sounds like the most cursed Falcon Heavy in existence.
And the
That's a
blasphemy?
bit dangerous. Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, that just... no. And then we've got Musical Wolf saying, what's the highest wind during a Falcon 9 liftoff? I know we were talking before, I believe it's about the max sustain it can take is 30 knots, which is, I believe, 35 miles an hour, 50-ish kilometers an hour, if memory serves me right.
And that's a liftoff, because then at altitude it could take more. I remember, I don't know, Max, if you even remember some of these launches, but I do remember a while ago we had like a few launches where it was like 120 knots at like 40,000 feet or something like that. It was very high up. It's like upper level winds, but they can be stronger because the air is thinner. So it was like 120 knots or something, and again 40,000 or 50,000 feet up in the air. That's bonkers.
And it's also worth noting that Falcon 9 is actually one of the more vulnerable rockets compared to wind, because not only do you have to deal with launch winds, you also have to deal with landing winds, which unfortunately, for one of the most, I can't remember which mission it was exactly. I think it was either USSF 124 or Pace. I think
it was Pace.
Yeah, I think the actual launch attempt was scrubbed because of landing winds. Because of course the first stage coming back, it's missing a vast amount of propellant and thus mass compared to how it was for liftoff, which means it's much more vulnerable to a crosswind and being blown left or right, which means that's a lot more work for the grid fence to put in to keep it aligned. Because the last thing you want is for Falcon 9 to hit a gust of wind on the way down and be blown sideways, or blown to a point where the grid fins cannot compensate and correct for before you can initiate the landing burn. So launch and landing winds are a high priority for Falcon 9.
Yeah, and even during ascent, because it's like super long and super thin, like the fineness ratio, I think it's called, right? It's somewhere around 20 or something like that. Like the ratio of how tall it is compared to what is the diameter of the rocket is like a lot compared to other rockets like Atlas or even the most recent Vulcan and things like that. Like, it's just super long. And so with that, when you go up and you have like winds, in that case it's not like the intensity but more like the share. You have the wind hitting on one side, the wind hitting on the other side. You have a lot of bending forces that are trying to bend the rocket at the interstate. I think actually for the in-flight abort test, one of the reasons why it broke up, I think I saw like the second stage broke off from the interstage and the booster broke off, but the second stage came intact to the ocean. Like, I remember one photo, I think it was from John Krause, that he captured the impact of the second stage and the second stage as it came back down. So that was sort of a view of what it would look like if you were to bend a Falcon 9. So that is sort of the kind of bending forces that it has to fight against during ascent. So yeah, high winds and high share of wind, that is not good for the rocket.
Now
And
I
it's
want
also
a
worth
Falcon 9
noting.
Sleepy.
Yes, and it's also worth noting that Falcon 9, as it currently stands in the Block 5 configuration, the tank structures are as tall as it can be for how wide Falcon 9 is exactly. So Falcon is pretty much is as big as it's going to get, at least when it comes to the tank structures.
We are now
Max.
about. Oh, sorry. I just want to
Oh.
mention that we are about 36 minutes away from launch now at this point, so we should be getting, hopefully, the
Yeah.
verification from the launch director that we are go for propellant load, and if that's the case, they will start loading in about 30 seconds, beginning with the Stage 1 RP1 load, RP1 being Rocket Propellant 1, a refined form of kerosene. And the Stage 1 LOX load also begins, the liquid oxygen, or LOXygen as we like to call it here. The same time on the second stage, the RP1 loading will begin there. So notice that the RP1 and LOX are simultaneously loaded into the first stage, but loaded separately during the second stage, which will lead us to our favorite T-minus 20 minute, 20 second vent a little bit later in the count.
That's something that I was actually gonna ask Max, because usually about 2 minutes before they start propellant load, usually they vent the Falcon 9 tanks ahead of that. But I don't know if the wind might have been conducive to Max hearing that. I don't really know, because I know most of the time he's like, oh, I hear Falcon 9 venting, and it's like T-minus 38 minutes, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's the Falcon 9 tanks are venting for propellant load. That's actually the call out.
Yeah. One of the cooler parts about watching on the cave side for Slick 40 is if the winds are right, especially with our two primary viewing locations, you oftentimes can hear Falcon 9 venting before they begin prop load. Unfortunately, with the winds peaking like they are today, it might be difficult to hear over. But I am looking feverishly through my other camera here at the TE to see if we can see any signs of prop load.
Yeah, normally we start seeing that frost appear on the booster around T-minus 32, T-minus 31, 30 seconds, more or less. So basically in about 2 minutes, we should probably start seeing something if they have begun propellant load, or maybe SpaceX tweets about it. So
yeah, for reference,
We'll
the
see.
last tweet from SpaceX was that rocket was vertical at the pad, and that the 2-hour window opened 3:11 p.m. Eastern with 95% favorable weather. And as of now, they are still targeting 3:11 p.m. Eastern for liftoff, so about 33 minutes from now. Here's a question from Soul24, and this is always a fun one, asking why are there 4 lightning towers at Slick 40, which we can actually see all 4 of them today, whereas there's only 1 at 39A and Starbase. Alex?
But at Starbase, is there a lightning tower at Starbase? Because I haven't seen any.
I think that's just called the launch tower itself at this point.
Yeah, or Starship itself, yeah. At 39A, I believe it is because... So the reason why you see those towers, it's not that the lightning hits those towers, is that they are there to sort of be able to connect the cables that are actually acting like basically the points where the lightning will try to hit instead of hitting the rocket, right? You're trying to sort of cover the rocket in those cables, or try to have like a electronically insulated cover around it, right? And so at 39A, what you have is like just a single one, because from there you can extend all of the cables around the launch complex and protect the rocket. So you don't really need a set of 4 towers. But for example, at 39B, which is where SLS launches from, most of the time there's no launch tower there because it's a mobile launcher, right? So what they do is they have fixed lightning towers, right? And in that case, it's actually 3 rather than 4. It's a bit more weirder, but it's okay. And they're actually much larger lightning towers than the ones that we see here at 40. And the same thing, they are just there to be able to hang all of those cables that they eventually are used to be able to protect the rocket in case of lightning.
We are getting confirmation that the vehicle is venting visibly at this point, which means they are proceeding onto the fueling. But while we're talking about those towers, I think they're listening. I'm sure they're telling us that they're talking about us again, which is indeed quite shocking. I love the pun, and I love even more so that the pun is on a shirt that we actually have in the shop at shop.nasaspaceflight.com. So yes, we have the 4 Towers merch available, so you can get that on a shirt, you can get it on a coffee mug. It's I love it. I love the pun part of it, and just the 4 towers with the catenary wires. So just selfishly, any gear that has puns on it is one of my favorites.
I have to ask though, like, is it too soon for 4 towers? Because technically, over at 40 now, there's 5. Technically speaking,
We're just talking lightning towers, though. I don't think the crew access tower counts as a lightning tower.
but it's still a tower.
Oh my gosh! But then the joke doesn't work. The whole point is that it's shocking because of the lightning.
It's almost a joke. It's almost a joke within a joke, because there's 4 lightning towers, but technically there's 5 towers. But the 4 tower joke, you get it.
Now that my head hurts, let's continue on with some questions here. But first, I do want to thank Nigel for gifting 1 membership, as well as RC Horseman gifting 5 memberships. Thank you very much for that. And Max, this one is for you from I'd Rather Be Flying an X-Wing, saying, the best thing about today is it's a real nozzle. The best thing about a stubby launch is that there's 1 less stubby nozzle in existence.
I mean, they make new ones. It's the same with the full size Merlin vacuum nozzle. I reject your reality and I substitute my own.
Thanks, Adam Savage. Appreciate it.
I'm glad you got that reference, Sawyer. I'm really glad you got that reference.
Oh no, I appreciate a good Mythbusters reference. Let's see here. Some other questions we can tackle. Craig was asking, any word on what the first crew mission from Slick 40 will be? Perhaps Polaris Dawn? Max, have we heard anything about that?
Well, if you rewind a few months, we were under the impression that maybe it would be Axiom 3, and then after Axiom 3 was slotted for LC-39A, then we were wondering, oh, maybe it'll be Polaris Dawn, but from Polaris Dawn's website, or Polaris' website, they have historic LC-39A selected or typed out on their site. Maybe they could swap it over, or it could be a NASA crew launch. Honestly, at this point, it's all up in the air.
Well, no, it's still on the ground. That's the problem.
Oh, jeez.
But, yeah, so that will be interesting. The next crew launch, Crew 8, is also scheduled out of LC-39A. And that, by the way, is coming up in about 9-ish days.
You know, if we could all take bets here for a second, which one of you thinks, or which crew or what mission do you think will be the first crewed mission out of 40?
Ooh.
That's interesting.
I'll put my bet in. I'm going to go with Crew 10. I know that's way down the line. That's like a year down the line. So maybe Crew 9. But if I had to guess that before that they might do a CRS mission from there, use the crew access arm as a loading mechanism into Cargo Dragon like they do with 39A. But in terms of actual people launching from it, I think Crew 9 would be the earliest. Any
I would say that's a
contradictions,
fair
Alex?
assessment.
Alex, any thoughts?
Yeah, I have thoughts. I'm kind of waiting for a thing, but yeah, it kind of looks like they're gonna try first with a crew, especially if it not a crew, a cargo mission. Excuse me. If the crew mission is gonna be like the first crew mission is gonna be a NASA mission, I believe NASA wants them to try first with a cargo mission. That, or maybe they're try with a private crew mission, which in that case will either be Polaris Dawn or Axiom 4. But Polaris Dawn right now is no earlier than the summer. We'll see when it actually launches, because it's a very complicated mission, let's be fair. So there's a lot of development going on there. But also, the Axiom 4 mission is like October of this year right now. So it's going to be a little of time if they wait for a private mission. I'm thinking that we may see first a NASA mission going from there. Perhaps maybe Crew 9, which is the next one after Crew 8, obviously.
Wait, that's how numbers work?
Yes. Speaking of numbers, right?
It's definitely going to be interesting to see. I think right now one of the big holdups that we've noticed, at least, is they have not done a full test of a launch escape system from the tower. So at LC-39A, you've got the slide wire baskets, similar to what they're also doing at 39B. Unfortunately, no roller coaster. But we haven't fully seen the system yet. We haven't seen the system in use or being tested, and that is obviously critical before actually launching people from there. So that's something that we're going to have to keep an eye on too.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was waiting for here, because we actually have pictures of the system from Max. He was out there setting remotes, and while taking pictures of the Falcon 9, in the way that kind of tower kind of gets in the way, right? And so you can see some of these systems in there as well. But yeah.
Yeah, at last check from what we saw from Max, it kind of looks like a box. Like you hop inside a little box on the slide wire, but that is something that we will absolutely keep an eye on. And holy cow, this is unbelievable support coming in, even so much that Jake jumped up to say wow here. We have Wilbo Tiberius Baggins with the 500-pound super chat. Holy smokes. Wow.
Oh my goodness.
Saying, so NSF's Cornwall to Yorkshire, just down the road past the chemist. Wow. I mean, that is unbelievably kind, the support. We'll have to get Chris B on that to get that Cornwall to Yorkshire there. I know Chris would prefer it point-to-point with Starship, but the kindness and wow. Words.
It's rather difficult to find words after receiving support like that, because it is ultimately the generosity of those who keep coming back and keep supporting us. They are the reason why we are able to keep going. And for support like that, it means more than any words can say. So thank you very much.
Absolutely, yeah, a massive thank you. It's because of your support that we can do what we do and have all these cameras out here, both at the launch pad and on the rocket here, and having all the stuff following the Booster 10 roll at Starbase all at the same time while they're doing Raptor testing in McGregor. We couldn't do this without support from members like you, so a major, major thank you for that. And it's not just the big support, which is obviously greatly, greatly appreciated. It's, just the support that we get from you guys watching, sharing, liking, that really means a lot as well. So, thank you. Whew. We also have Brian Green saying, hit that like button for NSF. They're awesome, which thank you and appreciate. I always appreciate when people say that in the messages so I can read it and it's not like me begging people to like, but it's all appreciated. And Jay Keegan, a name we know here as well, with a punt token for me. So thank you. I appreciate that.
That's because he's not operating, so he cannot put it on the side.
Exactly. We can't, not putting it on screen for that, and I don't blame Patrick for it, because I don't necessarily deserve all the punt tokens here. Hey, oh wow. Thank you, Patrick. I will take that punt token happily. Oh boy, we are coming up on the best vent just about a minute from now. So we're getting close. So what exactly is the 20-minute vent? I guess we can kind of hit that here while we wait for it to begin, Alex.
Yeah, so as we usually know already by now, what they do right now at this point in the count, they finished that RP1 load on the second stage, and now they transitioned into the liquid oxygen load part of the countdown for the second stage. And so in order to get into that step in the countdown to load that liquid oxygen is a very cold liquid, and the lines right now are basically at ambient temperature, more or less, and so you need to flow a little bit of liquid oxygen through it so that first of all you don't get a flash boil off of that liquid oxygen when you're trying to flow it through at full flows and things like that. And most importantly as well, the materials just deteriorate if you actually go through with a full cold fluid like this one. And when that happens, you can see that venting coming off from the TE. They have that sort of relief valve on the side that allows them to be able to vent that gaseous oxygen overboard as they chill down those lines to the second stage on the Falcon 9. So that is what what the T-minus 20-minute vent is all about, just chilling down those lines that go up to the second stage in order to prepare for the start of liquid oxygen load in about 4 minutes from now.
And Max, we always see the T-minus 20-minute event as a great way not only to clear the lines, but also to get an idea of the weather. This is quite a unique look at the venting here. What are you making of that weather-wise?
Yeah, it sure is. I mean, it's rare that we ever get this perspective for launch anymore, at least on the Cape side. But with the vent doing what it's doing now, at least from our perspective, is just showing that the winds are essentially blowing right back toward us. If we were looking at Slick 40 from, say, the press site, or maybe even our other spot here at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, it might be a longer, I guess you could say, I promise it's not a pun, but a cape that Falcon 9 might be wearing. But from this perspective, it looks like it's blowing right back toward us, and that's appropriate because the wind is still howling over here. But SpaceX still shows to be having some confidence in the wind, either calming down below the limits, or they are already below the limits, and they are obviously feeling confident enough to proceed with prop load for hopefully a launch in just under 20 minutes. So everyone keep your fingers crossed.
Oh, they are indeed crossed, and I'll keep my towers crossed too. Although actually, that would be a bad thing. So at this point,
crossing your towers. That's a new one.
I mean, yeah, I'm trying to come up with something unique because you can cross your fingers. I don't really cross my toes, so maybe cross the towers. Just don't cross the streams. Anyway, back to the actual mission itself here. So this is a pretty big satellite. Is it one of the heavier satellites that they've carried up here, Alex? I believe it's, 5,000 kilograms?
I thought it was more closer to 4,000. The Merah Putih one was 5,800 kilograms. That is true, because that was a little bit larger in that sense, or at least a little bit heavier. But yeah, it is definitely not the one with a sort of largest size or largest mass. The heaviest that they have launched on Falcon 9 is about 7,200 kilograms, and on Falcon Heavy, which is the big one, that was about 9 tons with the EchoStar 24 satellite back in July, I believe, of last year. So yeah, it is definitely not the largest. It's somewhere in the middle for a geostationary satellite. Normally the lower end tends to be about 3 tons. Middle end, it's like the middle of the range is 4 or 5 tons, and then there's a few that are like 6 or 7 tons. And the outlier is like EchoStar 24 at 9 tons. But yeah.
Yeah, just a little outlier there. Okay, I love this username. If that was methaned, gifting 5 memberships.
We now know Jack's alt account.
It might be, for all we know, honestly.
Oh gosh.
Thanks, Max E.
I still laugh at how long it took you guys to pick up on that.
It didn't take me too long. I think it's more like Jack when he reads your super chats. He's like, "Oh, we have Max E," and I'm like, "Don't you realize that's our Max E?"
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. It was. I think it was one of the Raptor sides, but regardless, it was still funny.
Oh boy, yeah, you should come up with something like passing Max E instead of passing Max Q, something like that to
Yeah,
really throw him off.
that could be
That'd
the
be something.
moment. That could be the moment in our live stream where we throw it to him so that he can prepare with a launch. That'll be in about 10 minutes, right? So we'll get to Max E later.
Oh boy, and you can see now that the T-minus 20-minute event has basically come to a stop, which is what we were hoping for at this point. Everything so far continuing right on time. That means that they are now into second stage LOX loading. That is the liquid oxygen going into that second stage. It is fully fueled on the second stage with RP1 at this point. And the RP1, which is the rocket propellant 1, refined form of kerosene rocket fuel, is also still continuing to be loaded along with the oxygen into that first stage as well. Which, for those who missed it, Max, which first stage is this?
The first stage on the docket today over at Slick 40 is B1067, and this would be its 16th flight. During camera setup this morning, actually, it didn't look all that sooty, but maybe we're just jaded from higher flown boosters. But it's honestly wonderful to see that many commercial entities are trusting higher flown boosters to fly their payloads on. So yeah, this will be hopefully its 16th and next flight.
Oh yeah, no, it hasn't flown that many times. Only 15.
Actually, I believe it is the 17th, and it has flown 16 times.
Either
At least
way,
that's what I have on my spreadsheet.
still, it hasn't flown that much. Just 15, 16 free flights.
Yeah, after 15
amazing.
or even after 10, it all blends
It's
together.
amazing just how blasé or how quickly that's become just so blasé. Oh yeah, Falcon 9 first stage has flown over 10 times. Yeah,
Yeah, right?
It's fine. It'll work.
It's amazing.
I think at this point we're more shocked when it's like only flying for its second or third time, as opposed to its 15th or 16th.
Yeah, that's rare. That's very rare. And even if what happened to 1058 didn't happen, I think we were told. I think Elon said in one of the presentations that they were pushing for 40 flights or so, 60 flights on a Falcon 9 first stage, beyond 20.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're gonna go and push those boosters to the max.
Oh, jeez.
It's rubbing off. I'm telling you, everyone at NSF starting to make more puns. Even NASA's spaceflight official with some puns in chat the other day. So
It's a high stakes. That's a good one.
Yes, I do appreciate that one. Now, as we're getting closer, as mentioned, for those who may just be joining, can you kind of give a quick recap? Well, quick Alex recap of the satellite that actually is launching and what its purpose is?
Yeah, the satellite for this mission is the Merah Putih 2 satellite, that is also known as the HTS-113BT. HTS stands for High Throughput Satellite. The BT, I don't know what it means, and the 113, it's basically because that's where it's going to be located. It's going to be going to the 113° east location over Indonesia. This is a satellite built by Thales Alenia Space, or SPAS. I don't really know how they pronounce it because it's an Italian company with an English name. It's a bit complicated, but yeah. And so this is going to be Falcon 9 will be dropping it off on geostationary transfer orbit. Then the satellite will use its own propulsion to reach its orbital destination out at 113 degrees east in geostationary orbit. And so we're looking at a fairly normal GTO trajectory here, where The Falcon 9 launches to the east, straight east out of the Cape. It is about 8.5 minutes into orbit. Then about 20 minutes later, it performs a reland of the second stage to drop the satellite into that geostationary transfer orbit. So that's more or less what we're looking here for today. Booster landing on a drone ship, just read the instructions, and the fairings will be recovered by Bob. That is sort of what I did before, but yeah, a bit shorter.
There you go.
So I was able to find in my notes what Merah Putih means, because I actually wrote it down, but I couldn't find it, and it turns out you have to scroll down to find more things on your documents. And it stands for red and white, and it's basically about the red and white on the flag of Indonesia. So that is the reason why it is called Merah Putih 2.
And there we go. I saw a question earlier, and I think it's kind of fun to bring this up. Since this is a drone ship landing, just read the instructions, is downrange, ready to have the booster land on top of it. But someone was asking, if something happens with the booster mid-flight, and they can't really go for the drone ship, would they go for an RTLS? Which I know for that part the answer would be no, because there are special airspace clearances needed for an RTLS and sonic boom warnings and things like that. But I think it's interesting that people don't necessarily realize that for the landing itself, the rocket, the first stage booster, actually doesn't target the center of the drone ship until about a kilometer or so off the deck, right, Alex?
Yeah, it even during the re-entry burn, you see that it is actually not going to the drone ship. It just, after the entry burn, it steers itself with after the entry burn, you see it steering with the grip fins and everything. It changes the attitude very rapidly to be able to steer into the sort of in the vicinity of the drone ship, because even before the re-entry burn, it is not even targeting near the drone ship. It needs to steer itself to that location. And even then, as you mentioned, when it steers, it's not steering actually to the drone ship, just near the drone ship, just closer, right? And it sort of targets the ocean near the drone ship. So if it fails, it just goes to the drink.
Yeah, that's pretty much so. It's a way to save the deck if something goes wrong, which we've seen before. Thankfully, it's been a while, but it has happened. And even for RTLS missions, it's technically the same thing as we saw with CRS-16, where it was going to come in and land on land, and then it had a valve problem, and so they just splashed it in the water nearby, therefore saving your landing pads.
Yeah, and also one thing that is interesting, it doesn't even target the drone ship itself. When the Falcon 9 is trying to land on the drone ship, it just targets a location in the ocean where the drone ship is supposed to be, right? Like, there's no how to say this, there's no like, oh, I'm sensing the drone ship or something like that. It's just, it targets a landing location, right? And the drone ship just tries to stay in that landing location. But if it were off by even 2 or 3 meters, it will then the drone ship will not be there, and so that will be a very bad day for Falcon 9. So also the drone ship needs to be very stable. Like, I think there was a time where they had a drone ship landing, and the drone ship, one of the thrusters wasn't working. And with one of the thrusters not working, it doesn't mean that it cannot move, but it cannot hold a precise location on the ocean. And so it wouldn't have been a good day for Falcon 9 to be able to land on that drone ship, because then it will not land on the drone ship, right? The drone ship will have drifted or something like that. And it is a very important thing to also have the drone ship in good condition for a landing.
Yeah, that kind of helps. Max, I want to do one final wind check with you before we send you off to go operate all the cameras out there. Has the wind calmed down? Gotten any better? Because I know there was concerns that it might be on the edge of the go-no-go limits.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the placebo effect or if there has been a real change of wind speed, but it seems like it has gotten a little calmer. I'm seeing actually quite a bit less whitecaps here on the water in front of us. But I think so far things are looking good. Obviously, we are almost finished with prop loading now. But unfortunately, it is time to bid both of you adieu for a little bit. So, good luck and Godspeed, gentlemen, and I will see you on the other side.
Sounds like a plan. Happy tracking. All right, we are getting that much closer to launch now. We are about T-minus 6.5 minutes. At this point, the engines should be conditioned ahead of launch. So what happens at T-minus 7-minute mark there, Alex?
Yeah, so pretty much like they do with the T-minus 2-minute event, where they chill down the lines to the second stage, they do a similar thing but with the Merlin engines, where they chill down the liquid oxygen turbopumps on the Merlin engines, precisely for the same reasons before, to not have flash boil off of your oxygen into gaseous form, and also because that liquid oxygen, if you try to bring the metal on the engine from ambient temperature rapidly to cryogenic temperatures, that can make the metal shrink very fast. It makes it brittle and things like that. That is a very bad day for the engine. So what they do is this sort of engine chill, where they flow just a little amount of that liquid oxygen through the engine turbopump to be able to cool it down ahead of flowing it at full pressures and full flows. So yeah, that is sort of where we are right now. We should also have already loaded that RP1 on the first stage. So RP1 should already be loaded on the first and second stages, and soon we'll see the transport director on the pad there retract a little bit out from the rocket. You can see it on screen as well.
Yep, you'll notice right underneath the fairing there are kind of these little clamps, it looks like. Those will open up, and then you will get a retraction of about 1.8 degrees. So we're not talking it moving back super far, but you can actually kind of see the clamps opening up from Max's view there. But it's just a little bit ahead of liftoff, and then at the actual launch itself, it will do the throwback maneuver, where it will lean back a lot farther to get out of the way of the vehicle. That also, as the vehicle launches, the lines that have been connected to it, the ones that have been fueling it, providing it electricity, even providing conditioning for the spacecraft inside of the payload fairing, those will all retract away so that they don't get ripped off, and that they can also then be protected and used again, especially with the current cadence SpaceX has in, say, 2-3 days from now.
Yeah, in fact, the next launch after this is on the 24th, so 4 days from now.
And that'll be another Starlink mission, but for this one now, we are under 4 minutes away from the Merah Putih launch here. And you can see now that strong back retracting slightly away from the vehicle. Keep in mind, a minute ago, those clamps were around the rocket. Now they're open there.
Yeah. Just a little way. There you go. You can see it.
And vehicle looking frosty, which all of that, again, is completely normal. That is because of the supercooled propellants that are inside of the tanks and the warm ambient temperatures of the Florida air on the outside. We are now approaching the T-minus 3-minute mark. So at this point, fueling is getting close to wrapping up, right?
Yeah, the first thing will be first stage LOX load complete. That'll be when the Falcon 9 booster is going to be fully loaded with propellants, and then about 1 minute later, it'll be the same, but for the Falcon 9 second stage, and then the whole rocket will be already fully loaded with propellants by that point. So, and after that, we're going to see a return of that Stromback vent, right? It's not going to be the T-minus 20-minute vent, right? It's going to be T-minus 1.5 minute vent. And that is when they do those gas closeouts where they vent out the remaining liquid oxygen on the line so that, it doesn't do any boomy stuff at liftoff.
Yeah, we definitely don't want that. And then again, at T-minus 1 minute is when the big milestones really begin, with the pressurization of tanks to flight pressure, and Falcon 9 entering startup, meaning the onboard computers then take control of the countdown, hopefully leading to an engine ignition at T-minus 3 seconds and a liftoff at T0. We are now at 2 minutes and counting. As you mentioned, we should be keeping an eye out for that final vent a couple seconds from now, about the midway point up the transporter erector, that metallic gray structure that's partly blocking the view of the rocket currently.
There it is. And stage 2 LOX load is complete. Falcon 9 is now fully loaded.
All right, it has all the propellants it needs, and it's going to be conditioning itself now to get ready for liftoff. about 90 seconds from now. And again, this is completely normal, as you mentioned, purging the lines of any remnants of the liquid oxygen that was in there, and it's super cooled, hence all of the vapors that you see. We are now continuing here to T-minus 1 minute, so Falcon 9 entering startup, and the tank's pressuring to flight levels. The next thing we'll keep an ear out for, or an eye out for, is the launch director verifying that we are go for launch, which will happen at the T-minus 45 second mark. And there's T-minus 45 seconds. We'll let you know as soon as we hear the official word. You're now coming up with T-minus 30 seconds. We have the confirmation that Falcon 9 is in startup, so we continue the countdown here. About 20 seconds now till liftoff. We are go for launch. In about 10 seconds from now, we will hopefully see liftoff of this Falcon 9. Keep an eye at the bottom of the rocket, potentially for a green flash, followed by the water deluge system, which there it is. Ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of Merah Putih 2 on its way to geostationary transfer orbit, and it is on its way. You can hear a little bit of the wind still there, but amazing sound of the launch. As you can see there, the rocket now passing through the speed of sound and approaching max Q, which is maximum aerodynamic pressure being forced onto the vehicle there. So far, everything continuing to look great so far for Falcon 9's flight. Fantastic onboard view as always there from SpaceX. The next thing that we're going to be keeping an eye out for is 3 events happening in rapid succession. The first being MECO, main engine cutoff, when the 9 Merlin 1D engines, which you see there spreading out in the thinner atmosphere, will turn off. That'll be followed by first and second stage separation, and then ignition of the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage, which is SES-1, or second engine start 1, followed about 45 seconds after that by payload deployment. Or payload fairing deployment, excuse me.
Probably too early.
Little too early there, yeah. You can see the vehicle already about 50 kilometers up. And we should be seeing that MECO momentarily, the main engine cutoff. And there it is. We have MECO. And we should be seeing stage separation. There we go. The non-stubby nozzle on the right is the Merlin vacuum engine on the second
good
stage.
nozzle?
The good nozzle, yes. The stiffener ring falling away, and we have ignition on that engine. We see it starting to glow there. So for those who don't know, what is that ring that falls off there, Alex?
Yeah, there is a stiffener ring that sort of keeps the structural integrity of the end portion of the MVAC nozzle, because that is a very thin nozzle extension that it has, and so you don't want to have it during ascent to vibrate too much and move around and potentially breaking off. So that is sort of the protection that it has to make it more rigid. And we're coming up here on fairing separation.
And here's a view inside those fairings. And there is the separation, revealing the spacecraft now to space. And those fairing halves will be recovered and likely flown again. In fact, we had confirmation recently that one fairing half at least has been flown 15 times with a plan to fly it again for a 16th.
Yep. And speaking of I guess I should say, it does have a benefit to have the stiffener ring on the MVAC engine. But if you observe our latest, so this is the current Falcon 9 launch, right? The previous Falcon 9 launch, we covered it. It was from Vandenberg, and it didn't have a stiffener ring. So if you look at the footage, it didn't have a stiffener ring, and yeah, it seems like maybe SpaceX is doing a best part is no part kind of approach with that piece of hardware.
Could be. And I love the view on the left, again, with the grid fins extended, which don't do much at this point, but once we get into the thicker part of the atmosphere, you'll start to see them moving and helping to steer the vehicle. For now, though, a lot of those fine movements you could see, like from that puff there, are using the cold gas jet thrusters to help kind of maneuver it. So how exactly do those work, Alex?
Yeah, so those thrusters are basically gaseous nitrogen that are loaded on high pressure COPVs on the interstate. Actually, not in the interstate. It's actually on the RP1 tank. But yeah, so those that nitrogen at high pressure, you release it and you create thrust, just like I guess a fire extinguisher kind of thing, just with nitrogen rather than CO2. And so you have the bottle, and you just open a valve. It's very simple. It's not really that complicated to use during flight, and so that's why they use it on Falcon 9. It's a very simple system. There's like, I think, 4 thrusters per pod, and there's 2 pods separated 180 degrees on the interstage of Falcon 9. So that's what they use for maneuvering as they are outside of the atmosphere. But as you mentioned, once they are through the atmosphere, they use the grid fins most of the time. The thrusters are still useful, but the majority of the guiding is with those grid fins.
Getting great views of the second stage today there with the
yeah.
Earth behind it. Now keep an eye on the left. We should be starting the entry burn momentarily. That will help slow the vehicle down by fighting fire with fire. Basically using the fire sort of as a heat shield to kind of slow itself down and protect itself as it goes through the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And there we go. We have ignition on that entry burn. You see in the bottom left, the first stage speed decreasing dramatically. The altitude as well continuing to go down. This is also how the boosters get sooty, as you can kind of see the camera getting a little dirty there. It is a carbon-based fuel, so flying through all the carbon base, you get soot, and that's how the vehicles get sooty.
Take a look at the grid fins now, because now they're trying to steer. The thrusters are firing. This is what I mentioned before, right? That after the entry burn, it tries to guide itself to the vicinity of the drone ship. Again, it's not fully targeting the drone ship, but it tries to get near it. And then during the landing burn, it steers all the way to the drone ship. But yeah, it's kind of crazy, this part. And there's a lot of clouds there, so maybe we'll see the booster flying through the clouds. That's going to be awesome.
Right, and so we should be seeing the second engine cutoff on the right first, actually, followed by landing burn, and hopefully touching down on the drone ship. So you can see now 9 kilometers off the deck, it is really starting to slow down to 1,300 kilometers an hour and dropping quickly, which is what we want to see. We should be expecting SECO 1, second engine cutoff 1, any second on the right side of your screen. And you can also start to see on the left side the grid fins are starting to wiggle, so as the thicker atmosphere they are helping to steer. There we go. We have SECO 1 Second engine cut off
Burn
one.
start.
There's the drone ship.
Ah,
Amazing still. Standing by for landing leg deploy. There it is. And a little bouncy there, but touchdown. Another successful Falcon 9 booster landing. This time on just read the instructions, and the streak continues.
yep.
Alex, I know you've got all the fun facts about the landings and things like that. How many are we at now since the previous failure?
This is the 201st since that last failure with B1059. And the funny thing is that you probably saw the deck of Just Read the Instruction. It was very clean and very well painted. That was because for this flight, this is the first flight after it has undergone like a refurbishment process, and so it was painted like it's super clean. It doesn't look like all beat up like before.
For now. That's going to change, I'm
For
sure,
now.
before the end of the year as it supports a lot more landings. Oh boy, that beautiful launch there. I know Max has already had to leave his viewing site, but definitely want to thank Max Evans for his camera work and his contributions leading up to this point in the stream. So just want to acknowledge Max and thank him for that. Even though he likes the stubby nozzle, we can forgive him. We are going to keep an eye out on hopefully the vehicles separating soon. Unlike most missions where we're waiting like 40-45 minutes for separation, this one is scheduled to separate about 18 minutes or so from now, following a short second engine burn of that Merlin vacuum engine. It's a roughly 4 or 5 second burn approximately. Again, when we say all these times with approximately, the issue is that
No, it's an approximate 1 minute burn.
Oh, excuse me, 1 minute, thank you, yeah.
Yeah.
We say approximate because SpaceX does give us rough numbers, but they're actually calculated by the vehicle itself. So if for some reason it's a couple seconds longer or a couple seconds shorter, it's totally fine. It's just the vehicle is calculated, it was a tiny bit faster, or a tiny bit slower than I was originally thinking.
Yeah.
I do want to thank some support that we've been getting. We've got Bideford gifting 5 Red Team memberships. Thank you very much for that. And Coco Cats gifting a Red Team membership as well, which really appreciate all of that. And a boat kind of blocking the view there, but this is where the booster will return in just a few days, on top of just read the instructions, to be taken down and flown again, right?
Yep. Just read it's about to the left of here, where it will be sort of docking there, and then there's a crane that picks up the booster, puts it on a stand, and then the drone ship sails off again out to see. I'm guessing that it is gonna be like 2 missions from now, so not the next mission from 40, but maybe the next one after that, which may be, I guess, a Starlink 640, because the next one might be happening with ASOG with a shortfall of gravitas, and Starlink 639. So yeah.
Yeah, it's, if you've never seen it from our fleet cam, which is the view you're looking at right now on Space Coast Live 24/7, it's kind of crazy how they do it. They literally put a cap on top of it, not a beanie cap like Shuttle, but a lifting cap on it, raise it up, bring it over, fold the legs, and off it goes to then drive down the roads of the Kennedy Space Center and Cape Canaveral Space Force Station back to Roberts Road for refurbishment, which I saw a video yesterday of a tour bus that actually happened to be pulled over on the side of the road as one of the Falcon 9s was driving by. If you've never seen that, it really gives you a scale of how big this vehicle actually is. It is long and rotund, and I mean that in the nicest way possible.
Yeah, and you can see there that sort of map view. It's about a 20-minute trip from when the second stage shuts down and the moment that they relight the engine to put it into a sort of transfer orbit into geostationary orbit. So that transfer orbit's like an egg-shaped kind of orbit where the perigee is more or less at the same altitude as LEO, sort of around 170 to 200 kilometers up up above the Earth. But then the apogee, the sort of the highest point in that orbit, it could be anywhere from like 20,000 kilometers if it's like a subsynchronous that we call it, or a supersynchronous, which is above the geostationary belt. That will be over 36,000 kilometers. With this kind of mass, though, I'm gonna go ahead and guess that it's probably gonna be supersynchronous. It's probably gonna be about 40,000 kilometers of apogee for that one. But we'll not be able to see it here on the telemetry from SpaceX, though. That's going to be later after I think it's the U.S. Space Force's 18th squadron or something like that. They track things in orbit and they post what's their orbit and things like that. That's going to be when we figure out what's the orbit.
Here is a great question from Papa Hawkeye asking, how long does it take for the octograbber to attach?
We really haven't seen that in action, in the sense that it going out, it has like a mini garage on the, I think it's on the backside of the drone ship, and so it goes out and sort of slides underneath of the booster, but we don't really know how long it takes because we haven't seen it in action. So it's a great question, but sadly we really don't know. It will be awesome if SpaceX could put out some video of it in action and see how it works. We see the aftermath of it, of the octograbber already attached to the booster, but not the in between.
And for those who don't know, the octograbber, as it's known, is basically what is used to secure Falcon 9 during its return from out at sea, in this case on just read the instructions, all the way back into the port without the risk of it being knocked over or anything like that. Although, if your vehicle unfortunately is weak enough, like 1058, it will just snap in half. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have brought that up. It brings back bad memories. We love B1058.
Yeah, I kind of snapped there.
Alan also getting out here from the store saying, great stream guys, be sure to visit the store for Orbital Test Flight 3 swag. Getting the OFT3 patch there, designed amazingly by Pauline. So thank you for getting that, and thank you for the shameless store promotion. Let's see here. Jan is asking, have we had a booster been retired after end of life yet? I guess you can interpret that a couple different ways. Either, I guess, ending its flying career as well as sending it off in a blaze of glory.
Yeah, you're correct, because you could interpret that as just being retired and put on display, or being scrapped at McGregor. We've seen some of the old Block 2 and Block 3 boosters scrapped there at sort of what I call the booster graveyard at McGregor. But yeah, and for Block 5, it's a different philosophy, I think, where they try to fly them as much as possible, and when it is not feasible to fly them anymore, their last flight is sort of an expendable flight, right? And we have seen that for booster 1046, which was actually the one that launched Merah Putih 1. Its fourth flight was with the in-flight abort test, and then B1051, B1049, those two were expended on sort of their last mission possible, I guess. That SpaceX said, okay, you're not gonna fly anymore, but instead of rotting away in some scrapyard or something, you're gonna be flying for a last time, just of achieving something more, which is another excellent launch with another Falcon 9. In that case, it was 2 customer missions. I think it was Eutelsat 10B for 49 and Galaxy 3132, I believe. I'm trying to do that without looking at my spreadsheet, by the way. So yeah, those those two went out on a blaze of glory, right? That's the expression that you guys say.
Yep.
And yeah, the Viking funeral.
By the way, common Alex flex with the without having to look at the spreadsheet.
Well, it's also because it's like those are the missions where they expended a Falcon 9 booster. I guess I should also say B-1047 was also expended on purpose. I'm mostly sure that probably someone in the comments was saying 1047 was also, and I just remembered it. But I wasn't looking at the chat if someone was saying that, by the way. I just remember it when you were saying the spreadsheet stuff. Because it is true that all of the early ones, Falcon 9 Block 5 boosters, they were like the early versions of this sort of experience. Now they have a lot of flights on later boosters, right? Those boosters have been built with the previous experience of these early ones. So these early ones probably were not meant to be reused a lot of times, but at least more times than Block 2 and Block 3, because those were expended on their second flight. So yeah, kind of looks like these early Block 5 boosters, they were just not there to be reused a lot of times. Let's put it that way.
And there are boosters that you can go see yourself in person. There's the Gateway exhibit at the Kennedy Space Center. They have one as well at the Johnson Space Center, and one in Colorado as well.
And ironically, none of those are Block 5 because of this. Because where we said that when they try to retire a Block 5 booster, they sort of have that Viking funeral of just, okay, you're flying for a last time, and it's going to be expendable launch. You're going to go on a blaze of glory. So yeah.
Either that or you are the weakest link. Goodbye.
More references.
Here's an interesting question from Rory. First, I do want to say someone in chat named Kevin Michael Reed says Alex doesn't need a spreadsheet. Alex is a living spreadsheet.
Nah, I do need this spreadsheet. There's so many things. I have so many pages in this spreadsheet that I will never be able to remember off the top of my head. There are things like when certain boosters were expended. It's easier because it's been like just a handful of Falcon 9 Block 5s, and let's say that in some occasions it's been a bit traumatic, right? But yeah, because it's like, oh, they're expending it, what? And then others like 46, it was actually the opposite. It was like, oh, that's a cool expending of this booster, because it was on infrared test. They actually exploded the booster on purpose. So yeah.
That was a fun one.
Yep.
And yes, to all the people screaming at me, yes, there is one as well in Hawthorne at SpaceX's headquarters. I have a picture of me underneath it. Yeah, that's an early one. That was the first landing, I believe, which they then decided to clean the soot off of it and regret it to this day.
They actually painted over it, and recently they painted over it again because it was like 5 or 6 years already on display, and they were there for like a few months painting it and trying to get it more, I don't know, looking more whiteier or something, I don't know. But yeah, it is also near the coast, to be fair, so it's probably a bit rusty as well.
Well, that's what happens on the worst coast. I mean West Coast. Sorry, there's no one here to defend the West Coast, so I had to.
Now I'm looking at chat, and someone says the highest tier of membership shall include access to the spreadsheets.
Ooh. That's actually not a bad idea. Anonymous.
I cannot promise anything.
We do have Anonymous with a store message saying, "Can you please say hi to my son Troy? He's a channel member and obsessed with Starship." Well, hi Troy. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being a channel member
Troy.
and for all the love of Starship, which obviously we all love here too. So happy to share it with you. Now, the question I was going to ask before I got distracted by Kevin's comments there was it was asking. Let me see if I can find it again. They were asking who's piloting the drone ship. So, for just read the instructions, I know it is a drone ship, but who's actually steering it, getting it out there, and bringing it back?
Well, for the So for the landing, obviously no one is on the drone ship, but they have a recovery team that after the landing they send remote signals to the booster so it's saved and everything. But in between they have a tug. I believe for this one was Signet Warhorse 2, I believe is the name. Or might have been the other one. They use like two different tugs. Then Bob and Doug also can be used as tugs, although lately that's not gonna that hasn't been the norm lately. It seems like they have had issues when they have used the ferry recovery vessels as tugboats. But yeah, the drone ships, there's this thing of them having thrusters big enough to be able to pull themselves out to sea. But they don't seem to be using them because they have their own tracker system. They have the tugs. Also, they have their own tracker systems, and we have never seen, at least so far, the tugs like going away and leaving the drone ship be on itself. That it's something that hasn't happened yet, I believe. But maybe Gav, if he's maybe watching, he could correct me because he's the boat guy. I know about some of the boats, but I'm not the boat guy.
By the way, you are correct. It is Signet Warhorse the third.
Oh, the third. Okay, I thought it was the second. Okay.
But yes, that left around about the 16th, I believe, along with just read the instructions for that. Ooh, taking a good look on board now. We are getting that much closer to the ignition again of that engine for one final burn before deployment of the satellite. So what is that kind of like venting that's coming out the top of the engine there?
Yeah, that is the oxygen bleed line on the MVAC engine. What they're doing right now is they're chilling down the engine, sort of the same as we talked about when they do the liftoff portion. It has been in space for like 15 minutes coasting, right? So its temperature is basically not the same as the one that it was when you flow liquid oxygen through it. So they need to chill it down again in order to prepare for that burn in just a few minutes from now. And that is sort of why when we see that blob of ice coming out from that pipe there, that is a blob of solid oxygen. A lot of people think, oh, it's the condensation from the tanks that has fallen down. Sometimes there's a little bit of ice that does fall down there, but it's very unusual. It's mostly that solid oxygen from the oxygen that is being bled out of the engine right now during that portion of the flight that we are right now. So yeah, maybe we see it later before the deployment of the satellite, where it's like this big blob of ice. It's always cool.
But in the meantime, it's snowing oxygen.
Yep.
That is still so cool to see. Yeah, and you see some of the chunks of it flying by there, little piece. So this is all normal and expected, and yeah, but don't stick your tongue out and try to eat any of that snow. Yeah.
I'm looking to that's the chunk of ice that is growing there on the side of the MVAC. Once that engine ignites, that's gonna be flown out and it's gonna be burning on that exhaust. That is always so cool when it's like thrown out and you see it going through the exhaust and it just push. I don't know how to explain it. You'll see it in about a minute or so.
Yeah, these icicles are good. The Urinsicle that appeared on a space shuttle mission, not so good.
Yeah, that's not. Yeah.
Which did actually happen, and maybe we'll bring it up on the upcoming Shuttle Sundays, which be there or be square Sunday, 2 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. Eastern, starting off this week with STS-1. Little shameless self-promotion there. Plus, people can now mark shuttle off on their bingo cards. We're getting that much closer, as you can see on the bottom, to the SES-2, that is second engine start. Number 2, the ignition that we were just talking about. And a reminder, this is to place the vehicle into a geostationary transfer orbit, which means the satellite itself, once it's deployed, will actually maneuver itself into its final orbit, right?
It has its own propulsion and own tanks and everything to be able to move itself to that final position.
It's also interesting that you can kind of see the speed dropping a little bit with the oxygen venting, but that should be going up again any moment with engine relight.
Here comes. And off it goes.
That ice getting destroyed by the exhaust there. Gotta love that.
I love it.
Of course, the video feed drops out there just as the ignition begins.
You can see how the orbit changes.
Yeah, you can see that blue line there that was moving as it showing its actual current path. The speed in the bottom right increasing. And everything glowing a nice, beautiful orange.
It's orange.
There it is. Was waiting for that. Continuing so far with the burn, as mentioned, it's about a minute long, so probably about 10 seconds or so left.
Yep.
We'll keep an eye out on it. So far, everything looking good. Now at 35,000 kilometers an hour and continuing to climb in velocity there. And we have Seco 2, second engine cutoff 2. That is the final planned burn of the Merlin vacuum engine for this mission in terms of deploying the satellite. We will likely see it have one more ignition to intentionally destroy the rest of the second stage to prevent more space junk, right?
No, this is one of the weird ones that actually doesn't, because for geostationary transfer orbits, it tries to actually reserve all of its performance and all of its propellant to be able to push the satellite that you see there all the way closer to the geostationary orbit. Because you also have to take into account that if it did any sort of deorbit burn, it will have to be at around apogee, which is 6 hours after this burn. So it will have to take a long time to do all of that. And so actually the second stage, what it will do is vent whatever residuals remain on the tanks. It'll drain its batteries and just stay passively in this orbit until... So the perigee, the lowest point of this orbit, it is low enough that it can sort of feel the drag of the atmosphere, and so eventually it'll come back down to the ground within a few years. And so, but it'll stay in this orbit. For these type of missions, the second stage does not target and control the orbit. For Starlink missions, they have plenty of performance to do that. It's closer to home, it's a low Earth orbit, so they can do that. But for these more high energy orbits, it doesn't happen that way. We are actually working on a video about that, by the way. Just saying. Stay tuned.
Yeah, there is basically a agreed upon rule that all satellites and vehicles that launch need to have some way to keep themselves out of other people's ways. Again, it doesn't mean everyone always follows it, but it's supposed to. So the typical 3 ways that you see are intentionally burning itself up in the atmosphere by firing its engines into a deorbit, eventually letting the force of gravity take over and have it burn up like this one once the perigee gets low enough. And then the third option typically is a graveyard orbit, where there are specific orbits that is meant just for dead satellites and stages to kind of stay there and be out of the way.
Yeah, like see for example this satellite, right? Whenever it is its end of lifetime, right, which maybe 15-20 years from now, we cannot leave it at the same orbits as the other satellites that are in geostationary orbit. So what they do is they leave a little bit of reserve propellant on board to be able to push it slightly higher. I think geostationary, like the graveyard orbits for geostationary orbit, are like 300 kilometers above the belt of geostationary orbit. So they raise a little bit that orbit and clear it away from the rest of the satellites to not have a lot of junk basically on that belt. So yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it lowers the risk of a satellite accidentally crashing into it with it not having any control there. It also makes room for newer satellites that are actually functioning to go into geostationary transfer orbit to replace some of the defunct ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We are coming up very shortly on the deployment of this spacecraft here, as the vehicle now more than 590 kilometers in altitude. I do want to shout out here, Siren, thank you for getting an item from the store, saying a fine addition to my collection, robotic wheezing, getting the new patch. And then Bob Thomas saying, I live 150 miles south, I watch you guys, and then when it launches, I step outside. Thank you. Well, thank you for watching, and
Is that the
glad we
moon?
can-
Near the MVAC.
Oh, yeah. Look at that. And of course, they cut away.
Bye, eyes.
But yes, thank you very much for that, Bob. And as someone who's also about 150 miles south, you can still get quite the view from down here. So how exactly does the spacecraft separate, which we should be seeing in about a minute or so? What's the mechanism to do that?
Normally what they use is like a spring system where you release the spring and the satellite just is pushed off by that elasticity of releasing the spring. And so you probably will see that to the right here if they keep that view. You'll see sort of that spring system popping out and the satellite is pushed out. So that is usually what they use for these kind of separations.
So let's keep an eye out for that on the right side of the screen there. It should be deploying any second now.
There it goes.
There we go. Merah Putih 2 now on its way, soon to be in geostationary orbit. At an altitude of about 800 kilometers up at time of deploy. That is unbelievable and a beautiful view.
That's another happy customer.
Yes. Another
And
success
successful
for
mission.
Indonesia. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Ooh. Everyone clapping.
Yay, yes. All the claps in chat too.
Yeah, everyone clap. Yay! You can kind of see sort of the limb of the Earth back there on the bottom. I don't know if you can see it, because it's during the night, obviously, but you can sort of discern it on the lower left. But anyways, yeah.
There we go. Yeah, as long as we can have this view, take a look at that off into the darkness. It's also fun comparing it to something like Nova C and that deployment mechanism.
Mm.
So as we go from space to back down here on Earth, I want to thank everyone for their absolutely generous and fantastic support during this mission. And of course, I want to thank the people that were with me here today. No longer on comms, but Max Evans, who's out in the field providing all the tracking cameras, which we'll get to show you some of those replays in a little bit. Fantastic work, and also fantastic work from you, Alex. Thank you very much for co-hosting with me here with your amazing knowledge and spreadsheets.
It's been a pleasure, and of course, a lot of clapping also for Max for those views.
Yes, keep the claps coming for Max. And then we had Patrick behind the scenes, pushing the buttons, pulling the levers, running in the human-sized hamster wheel, or whatever else. Whatever other wording we come up with there, but helping to make this all happen. So, huge shout out to Patrick. Thank you very much, as always. And thank you again to everybody who joined us here today. Stick around for a final launch replay here, and we will see you again on the next launch coming up very soon. So stay tuned for that. Keep up to date with those launches at Next Spaceflight app. I'm Sawyer Rosenstein. I have been your host for today. Have a great one.
And here we go.
We have liftoff. Propulsion continues to be normal.
RCPA chamber pressure looks good.
Rolling up. Roger, roll, Atlantic.
Tango down to nominal.
Telecomsat FD off. Bring in FD off. Off. It's orange! Orange 25! Oh my god! Decollage! What is it? Put that in the big bag, Eagle.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
The methane would be igniting in the flare, correct?